Hi. Um, welcome. My attempt at a theatrical entrance. Welcome to Drop. Today, I'm going to be talking about what we need as a city to be more like Silicon Valley. So what Toronto needs to be like Silicon Valley. So if you Google it, how Toronto can be more like Silicon Valley, and you hit, I'm feeling lucky, what do you think you'll get? What do we need to be more like Silicon Valley? Scooters, lots and lots of scooters. I'm just joking. I don't know, anyone see your activation or scooter activation at Collision? Anyone? Okay. We have a bunch of scooters. Our mission is to make our consumers' lives more rewarding by helping them level up. Why we did scooters at Collision was we want to level up the way that people are getting around the city. And today, thank you all for coming here. We actually will be giving away a scooter to a lucky individual here in this audience. And these scooters, you probably haven't seen much of them in Toronto, but it is a big thing in Silicon Valley. And so make sure to pay attention to the presentation because I will be asking one question and the person who gets it right will be able to walk away with the scooter today. So I'm Derrick, I'm the CEO of Drop. Drop is a mobile rewards company. We've been in operations for about 3 years now. We've been in this office since last August. My background, I started my career on Bay Street and spent a couple years there working on the trading floor at some of the banks here. Left, started my last company, which was in the music and entertainment industry. Sold that company in 2013 to a company called SFX Entertainment. They went public that year. They own big music festivals. And how the idea for Drop came about was we had a lot of sponsors wanting to sponsor our music festivals. One of them was called Tomorrowland in Belgium. And it was always very hard to prove to sponsors the ROI of their sponsorship dollars. So we started thinking a lot about, oh, do we build a rewards program for music festivals? One thing led to another, and that's how Drop was founded. The name Drop comes from the word bass drop. So all our rooms are actually named after music festivals. We have 3 million members on our platform. To date, we've raised over 25 million of announced capital, and we've done well. We hit number 2 in the App Store in Canada, number 3 in the US. But today, you're all here to learn about Silicon Valley and Toronto. So who here has been to Silicon Valley? Okay, wow, good amount of people. This is the 101. Silicon Valley traditionally is south of San Francisco. It is the tech mecca of the world, global center for high-tech innovation and social media. Silicon Valley over the years has actually started migrating north to San Francisco as well. So what can we do to be more like Silicon Valley? It was a trick question. Nothing, because I don't think we want to be Silicon Valley. Why? Because according to the New York Times, Silicon Valley is over, says Silicon Valley. A bunch of VCs coming together. Oh, why is Silicon Valley over? Here's a quote from the New York Times. When you invest in a San Francisco startup, you're basically paying landlords, Twilio, and Amazon Web Services. Silicon Valley is changing and its lead over other tech hubs narrowing. How are you supposed to have a startup in a garage if the garage costs millions of dollars? Scootering out of Silicon Valley. In a recent KPMG report, over 50% of people who responded said that and believed that Silicon Valley will no longer be the innovation tech center of the world. So I kind of tricked, it was a bit of a trick question. I don't think we want to be Silicon Valley. I think we want to create our own identity. But what can we learn from Silicon Valley and what made their tech ecosystem flourish? There's 9 things. I'm kind of OCD. I kind of want to have 10, but I couldn't think of 10. So there's 9. 1 is early adopter culture. 2 is a culture of celebrating failure. 3, feedback loops. 4, big dreamers. 5, strong venture capital. 6, elite local universities. 7, tax incentives. 8, modern infrastructure. And 9, an urban locale. So 1, vibrant early adopter culture. Scooters have been around in Silicon Valley for years. And I think it's really this culture of people wanting to try new things, test new things, be on the cutting edge of innovation, which makes the Valley a very unique place. Some of the most popular consumer apps and companies come from the Valley because I think people there are just more likely to adopt stuff. And there's a culture of that. Willingness to grow and celebrate failure. I think one of the big things that the Valley has is this culture of being okay to fail and celebrating those failures. And I think us as an ecosystem should embrace failure more. I think even investors in Silicon Valley, 9 out of 10 startups fail. And investors, when they back companies, I think in their mind are like, okay, the default is failure. Only 1 in 10 will actually succeed. And I think it's this embracing of the failure that makes the Valley a very unique place. And yeah, Uber, big IPO, I think it's just growth. A lot of companies in Silicon Valley share, mentor each other, CEOs, founders, executives, which lead to outcomes like Uber. 3, feedback loops. So it's this concept of keeping it in the ecosystem, keeping it in the Valley. I think in Toronto, we're seeing a lot more of this with companies like Shopify going public, Real Matters going public. And I think it's a lot of these angel investors. Who's heard of the PayPal Mafia? PayPal Mafia, yeah. So a lot of Facebook Mafia. There's all these founders, execs, and people who have seen the scale really giving back to the ecosystem. I think we're starting to also see a lot more people leaving Bay Street, leaving Wall Street, and going after tech jobs because it's just a really fun culture. And I think it's this culture of growth. And as a company here at Drop, we're now a Series B stage company. And really, when you think about the companies that have gotten to scale in Canada, there really aren't that many. And there needs to be more companies, like a Drop, like a Ritual, like a League, who are getting to scale and really giving back. And one of the biggest gaps we have as a city are people who've seen that scale from 50 to 500 employees, from 500 to 1,000 employees. And Silicon Valley has this feedback loop that just keeps feeding back to the ecosystem. Big dreamers and seeing scale. So FANG, I'm sure some of you have heard of Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google. A lot of these big companies are pumping people back into the ecosystem. And I think it's really this thinking big mentality. And I think what we need more of in Canada are founders that start companies and think big, raise big rounds, and go after the global market versus just going after Canada. Five, strong VC ecosystem. So if you look at VC, US VC investing since 2008, $36 billion went into US companies. In 2018, $130 billion went into the US ecosystem. Jewel, and you'll see here. Who's heard of Jewel? They raised a big round, and I accounted for a big part of that $130 billion. Elite local universities with global highly selective student bodies, Stanford, Caltech, Berkeley. 7, tax. This is a very interesting one. So the Twitter tax break was introduced to revitalize mid-market in San Francisco. So the governments in Silicon Valley are constantly trying to have companies move to Silicon Valley. And the Twitter tax break was one example. So $34 million in city taxes were given to companies that would move to San Francisco. The San Francisco city essentially said, hey, we want Twitter to stay here. We don't want you to move. They incentivized Twitter to move up to San Francisco, and that creates a lot more tax breaks and really pumps more money into the ecosystem. And I think it's really this tax incentive that has also helped the Valley build that culture. 8, modern infrastructure and high-speed bandwidth. So I think often we take this for granted. The fact that we can walk around and we have Wi-Fi everywhere we go, we're always connected. Google actually gave San Francisco free Wi-Fi in all public places. And I think, again, we take it for granted, but it's really, really important to build this culture of information sharing and always being connected. 9, really just an urban locale that attracts young, millennial tech workers. So Silicon Valley really has, you see scooters, you have the Golden Gate Bridge, of all this stuff, and I think, it makes the city really appealing for young people to want to work. All right, so I talked enough about San Francisco. We're clearly not in San Francisco or Silicon Valley. I don't think we want to be like Silicon Valley, but I think Toronto really is turning a corner. And I'm going to share a couple of really interesting things that are happening in Toronto that makes this, one of the next big tech hubs in the world. Who's heard of this? Fuck up nights. Fuck up nights. Anyone? Okay, so it's happening on June 20th at Shopify, and it's literally a night that you go to and you just talk about all your fuck ups. And I find this really interesting. Who's been? Anyone been? Okay. So I think really it's just embracing this culture of being okay to fail. And if you want to really embrace it, you can go to this event on June 26th or 20th. Capital. So when you look at Canada from 2013 to 2018, we've gone from having 1.1 billion in investments to 3.46 billion dollars. So clearly there's a lot more VC money coming into Canada, a lot more Silicon Valley, Sandhill VCs. And this is really going to help us build that ecosystem to create more startups that get to scale. This is the amount of VC funding for Canadian companies. So you'll see 2008 to 2018, there's a massive increase in influx and just investment into Canada. And so Globe and Mail, who's heard of Shred? So Shred, our finance guy. So Shred is a scientific research and experimental development tax program. And for those who haven't heard of it, essentially every dollar that gets invested into tech to build R&D infrastructure, you can get money back for that. And the government is actually cracking down on it. You'll see in the Globe and Mail article, they're over the last couple of years, a lot of companies are trying to really capitalize on it. But hey, it's leading to a lot of companies opening up offices in Toronto because of Shred. Many of these companies in the past open up offices for sales in Canada. So like Pinterest, Microsoft, Google are mostly sales offices. But what we're seeing now is that a lot of companies are actually hiring engineers in the city. And a lot of that is because of Shred. Instacart, Uber. And talent. I truly think that we have one of the best ecosystems for tech talent. We have great schools, Pinterest opening up offices, Toronto. Bloomberg said, who just beat Bay Area in tech jobs? Toronto. Samsung's launching an AI center, immigration. All this is really the tipping point for Toronto really becoming that next big tech hub. And we got a ton of great accelerators. So we have Velocity, Creative Destruction Lab, Waterloo, University of Toronto, DMZ, Mars, Techstars. The Economist called us Maple Valley, which is very interesting. I'm like, I don't think we want to be known as Maple Valley. This, to me, is a telltale sign. I never thought I would see the words North America's fastest growing tech conference and Toronto on the same page. And who's at Collision this week? A bunch of people. So I really think that now is our time to shine as a city. We have a great ecosystem, talent, a lot of VC investing. We have big tech hubs opening up here, companies getting to scale, Shopify, pumping out new investments into the ecosystem. And not only do I think it's time for us to shine as a city on the tech side, but Raptors, anyone? Okay. All right, so I think we have a ton of time for questions. I know it's the end of day on a Friday, but really what I really want to say was that I don't think we want to be Silicon Valley. I think everything is moving out of the Valley. We have a couple of team members here that have actually moved back. I think there's a lot of characteristics that make the Valley a great place. I listed 9 of them, and I think we want to really create our own identity. I think that we have a great universities. There's a ton of local talent that we really want to embrace. So if you're thinking about leaving Toronto, going to the Valley, hopefully this convinces you to stay. Happy to answer any questions. I mean, for Drop, it's been a crazy 3-year journey where my last company, we got to 12 people. Now here we're at about 60. My last company, I could barely raise $200,000 for the company. And now today, again, we've announced we've raised over 25, and we have another big round that we'll be announcing in the next month. Starting a company is not easy. I think, I know you're all here to learn about the Valley, but I'm happy to answer any questions about scaling, about growth, about what we've done as a company to get to where we are. I think there's still a lot we need to do. And I think, Toronto, there's no better place than doing it in Toronto. So happy to answer any questions about the presentation, drop, tech. Yeah, I think what we don't have enough of are founders that support other founders. I think that Toronto and Canada, there's this culture of, we're building this thing ourselves, and we have to, fight the good fight to get to where we are. We don't want to help other people as much. I think, again, in the Valley, it's pretty crazy. I think, if you're raising money, all you need are a couple of founder friends who have raised money, and you'll be able to plug yourself into all the VCs in the ecosystem. So I think that we just need to do more of it. There's tech accelerators. I try to mentor at Techstars, but I think in the Valley, literally, there's founders who've just seen the scale. They know exactly how to get to that scale. There's salespeople. There's marketers. There's product. Product is one of the toughest roles to hire for in Canada, because when you really think about it, especially in the consumer side, not many Canadian consumer tech companies have gotten to scale, in the tens of millions of consumers, hundreds of millions. Again, in the Valley, people are just like, oh, I've seen this. This is what you got to do to get to scale. So I think we just need more of that. And I have been in tech for 7 years now, and definitely feel it. 7 years ago, there's not much VC. 7 years ago, you mainly raised money from, there was kind of Omer's, Real Ventures, Golden Ventures, but now you have you have Panache, you have all these new local VCs that are pumping more money into the ecosystem. So it's definitely a very different time. And I think as we raise more capital, hopefully more companies like Ritual, the Drops, the Leagues, the insert name of high growth company will create people, will output people that have seen that type of scale and can help others. So failure, yeah. Since I'm talking about embracing failure, I think startups are hard. In our first round of funding, probably got turned down by most VCs because they're like, oh, air miles, does this model really work? There's a couple companies that tried in the past, 5 Stars, Belly, they built into local point of sale. I think that a lot of VCs often, they like to see patterns. And if they're like, oh, I've seen this pattern, didn't really work, then they often question you and don't invest. So I think for us, it's definitely been a pretty big uphill battle in that VCs are like, oh, when was the last Canadian consumer company that's gone to scale? They're probably like, oh, this loyalty thing seems pretty hard. I remember one VC, he had kind of like a British accent. He was kind of like the Simon Cowell. So Derrick, what you're trying to do is like getting on a surfboard. Getting on is the hardest part. I don't know if you can get on the surfboard. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he now regrets passing on our seed round. He probably would have made a lot of money. But I think it's just this constant uphill battle, right? So from the, often I say there's 3 Ps to fundraising: product, progress, and people. And you need, one of the 3 to raise, your first round of funding. You need 2 of the 3 to raise your second. And it's, our second round of funding, we want to raise to launch into the US. And every investor I went to in Silicon Valley was like, oh, you're a Canadian play, you're a Canadian company. Why are you raising this money? I'm like, well, because we want to launch in the US. And they're like, oh, okay, well, why don't you launch in the US and then come back? I'm like, I can't because I need your money for us to launch in the US. And so that was, that were some of the challenges in the second stage. I think now as we grow and as you scale, again, if you look at 2001 until now, only a handful of companies really have gone to the scale that we're at now. And not many, there's really only one way to go, and it's up, and it's to either go public. So again, myself not ever having done that before, I think the key is to surround yourself with people that can help, people who've seen that scale. And so as a company, our mission is to level up the lives of our members. But it's funny because as a company as well, right now we're trying to level ourselves up. And again, to that point, one of my points around mentorship and helping each other out, we're trying to surround our team with people that have seen scale and can help. So I'd say that this stage for me personally has been the toughest in terms of just like scaling and growing. You're hiring people and you want to control, maintain and control your culture. But I'd say throughout the years, there's been many times, we've probably screwed something up. But I think it's, to me, the most important thing and an attribute to have as a founder is grit, is just never giving up. Because, all those VCs that said no, if I'm like, oh crap, I think they're right, we wouldn't be sitting here today in this beautiful office. I wouldn't be here speaking to all of you. So I'd say those are some of the failures and challenges that we've had, and we still continue to face them, every single day. So yeah, it's been crazy. I think it's happened a lot faster than I thought. We've moved into 3 offices in the last, I think, like 15, 18 months. We started from across the street in a little small room, kind of like that. They actually, I just went back to the office yesterday. They're using it as storage. That's how small our first office was. I think everything's just like, when you raise venture, it's like rocket fuel, and you essentially have signed yourself up to build you need to build a rocket ship, because if you're building a little plane, that rocket fuel doesn't work in a little plane. You have to build that rocket ship. So I think for us, as we thought about the market and thought about what we're building, we said it really is a go big or go home opportunity. There's no such thing in my world, or in my view, there's no such thing as just like slow growth. I think slow growth just ultimately leads to demise and failure. I think. And consumer has been very interesting. In Canada, again, there's not that many consumer plays. And again, Ritual and Drop, I think, I keep using Ritual because I think they're doing a great job in scaling and growing. I think, it's happened a lot faster. And it just keeps happening faster and faster because, now we have even more capital to grow the company. So I think if you're, are you a founder or are you, okay. Yeah, I think when you sign up for VC, it's growth, but it's fun. I think, everyone at this company can probably look at themselves a year ago or 2 years ago when they started here, and everyone's growing. And as I always say to the team, we're not like a widget company. We don't build widgets. We're not a, oil and gas company or a mining company. You can't just add more mines. Like, it's really the people that have to grow and scale. And I think it's this obsession with growing yourself. We have that right now. And I think they're just, in Canada in particular, just really want to see more of that obsession, because I think, again, the Valley, there's just people always trying to learn and grow and figure things out. And I think we're very nice here in Canada. And I think we just got to be more aggressive and build these big companies. So I think for us, like, it's been a pretty interesting, 2-year journey, and it's been really fun. Yeah. Yeah. So the product, why I think, so NEA led our Series A, and I don't think they've invested maybe one additional Canadian company. And I remember being on the plane with the VC. I'm like, wow, this guy's really flying down to our office to check us out. And he was like, Derrick, I think you guys really operate like a Valley company. And I'll give you a couple examples of what that means for us. In the early days, so when I looked at the market, there was Air Miles, there was Aeroplan, there's all these companies that are big companies. Like, they all do a couple $1 billion in revenue. But I'm like, why do I have to carry around a physical card? Why did they have to build in the point of sale? Why can't we just ask the consumer for the data? Because I'm pretty sure if you ask them for the data, they'll be open to it as long as they're getting value. And so I remember sitting down with the CEOs of Air Miles and Amy and all these companies. I'm like, why aren't you just getting data from the consumers? And they're, oh, we've done research and they just won't do it. Like, okay, like who are you researching? Who's coming to your focus groups? Because I'm pretty sure if you put it in front of a consumer, they'll do it. And so for us, the first major decision we had to make was to not spend years trying to convince retailers to sign up on our platform, but to instead just go straight to the consumer and ask them, to essentially put in their banking information so that we can give them points for their spending. In the early days, we also, in a very similar way with companies like ClassPass or even Uber, it's a chicken and the egg, and we had to subsidize the marketplace to just start to make it work. And what that means is raising venture capital to be able to subsidize that marketplace. So we essentially on the consumer side just said, hey, download this app, free money, here are a couple brands that you can earn points from. And I think looking back, that was still probably one of the best product decisions that we've ever made. The second major decision was really quickly launching into the US. Because when when we were thinking ahead, we're like, okay, Canada is just a much smaller market. Investors wouldn't want to invest in this company if it was just Canada. So we launched Canada in 2016. We think we got to like 20, 30,000 users. And then we launched the US and went from 20,000 to 80,000 in a month, from 80,000 to 200,000 in the second month. And then we hit number 3 on the App Store in the US, and just like, it was wild. And really quickly went from a couple 100,000 to a million, and now we're at 3. And I think, really when you think about building consumer products, it's very simple. There's 3 things that you really want to focus doing: help save them time, help save them money, and make it fun. And I think it was this fun aspect that we were so particular about, because we looked at all the other products out there in the market and we're like, oh wow, this is just not fun. Some of these products just aren't fun. And for example, one of the things that we built was a snake game in the app, and we were literally just like team retreat. At that time it was like 7 of us. We did a team retreat, and we're like, what can we build this weekend that would be fun, and we can just test it as a growth growth hack. And we're like, oh, remember that old game on your Nokia phones with the snake? And so we built that, launched it, and people still play it today. People love the game. And we just made the product experience really fun. And I think that's really what made us stand out versus a lot of the other products out there in the market. Yeah, so the question was around how do you get into tech without a tech background? Sort of, yeah, essentially. What I love about tech is that, it's a meritocracy. I think it attracts some of the smartest people. We have great schools, and it just, anyone can get into tech. And I think for us, our core values at our company, hustle, grit, humility, and passion. And so I think it's really the hustle. Well, it's all 4 of those attributes that I think are really important, both for us as a company, but really when you think about getting into tech, right? I think it's the hustle to find a job, your first job in tech, or to start a company is really important. I think with your passion and find something that you're passionate about, and whether it's scooters to like a on-demand app. I think it's really some of those attributes that you really need to get into tech, and a lot of stuff you can figure out. I think there's a bunch of great boot camps in the city. There's BrainStation. You can learn to be a UX researcher or UX designer. There's a ton of stuff you can read online, but I think the best way really is to have mentors that you can go to help you not make some of the mistakes that they probably did in the early days. Like if some of the mistakes I made in my first company, didn't make in the second company, but I had someone back then who was like, oh, this, that, this. Like when I talk to entrepreneurs and founders now, I tell them, the first 5 decisions you make probably will determine how big or successful your startup is. So it's like, what market are you going after? What's the product strategy? Who's the co-founding team? So I think those are some of the things that you should consider when thinking about potentially getting into tech. And just like go to these events. There's a lot of events. Go to fuck up nights. There's a ton of stuff happening in this ecosystem that, again, 7 years ago just did not exist. Like 7 years ago, there's just all this stuff that you see just was not here. Our lawyer represents Hootsuite and a bunch of these big tech companies. He's like, yeah, the amount of activity now is like really at an all-time high. But I would just, caution why we don't want to be like Silicon Valley, because I think there's a bit of a bubble that's happening right now. There's scooters everywhere. There's a bit of, we just have to be careful, like, and just make sure whatever company that you're joining or, is actually solving a consumer pain point or, a problem, because I think there's just a lot of noise out there right now that you want to make sure you avoid as well. Yeah, great question. So the question is around mistakes and learning from some of those mistakes and blockers. I think really the first one was my last company. We started in my parents' living room, and my brother, who's now our CTO, was our first engineer, and he was a Waterloo co-op and almost dropped out of school to join us full time. And I was passionate about music, and I still am. We have like a stage, and all the rooms are named after music festivals. But I think it was a tough industry. It was a tough market, and a lot of investors didn't want to touch the music industry. And so I think that, and also our co-founding team in my last company was two guys who did not know how to code or design anything. So we like sat in a room, we're like, so what do we do now? So I think having, co-founders that can help build and design and really complementing, being really self-aware around what you're good at and what you're not, and then complementing yourself with people that can help you, I think is really, important. I think that my last company as well, we thought we were solving a problem, but it wasn't a big enough problem for, I think, to get to a certain scale. Hence why I think a year and a half into it, we're like, okay, we got a knock on the door from this massive company that was about to go public. So I think really obsessively focused on what that consumer pain point is and what the problem you're trying to solve is, and making sure it really is a problem. I think that's really important. Yeah, I think those are some of the the learnings that over the last couple of years that I look back, I'm like, oh, I wish we didn't make some of those mistakes. But you live and you learn, and again, we still make a lot of these. We still make mistakes as we grow and as we scale, but I think it's not making the same mistake again is really important. If anyone wants to stick around, I'm happy to answer some questions. But really think that Toronto, it's really our time to shine. We just hosted the biggest freaking tech conference in North America here in our city. We're hiring and bringing some of the smartest people back from the Valley. We are going to potentially win the NBA championship. But I don't want to jinx it. Did I just jinx it? Yeah, no, I think it's a great city, and hope that for those who aren't in tech, consider joining tech. Anyone can join tech. You just need hustle. You need some grit, passion, and yeah, thank you so much, and have a good day. And thanks for coming out to Drop. Thank you.